I've really grown to like Tozo products over the last year that I've been reviewing them whenever I have gotten the chance to do it, but I think it's safe to say that when it comes to open ear style earphones, they're not really my favorite, especially when they sit within this price range. But Tozo has put up a good fight with this product in particular. Thank you to Tozo for making this review possible by sending me this demo unit. All thoughts and opinions are my own. So let's jump straight into how these are built. The unboxing experience with these earphones is fairly straightforward and to the point. You get the literature, earbud braces to help stabilize the earphones a bit better for exercise and other activities, a charging cable, and of course the earphones within the case. The case isn't the most compact one I've seen, so it might be best to leave it in your gym bag or at home for when you want to go for any walks or runs. It has a neat matte finish all around it with the Tozo branding in chrome, so it catches light at certain angles. It has a USB-C charging point at the back, and the front has a built-in display to let you know how much battery the case has via the percentage displayed and when the earphones are being charged. Upon opening the case, you'll be greeted by the earbuds, which do take on a very different design to other open earphones I've seen before. These have a very smart finish to them with a matte finish on the outer section of the earphones, but the stem has a rubber finish, so is flexible so you can put it around your ear easily. The section that has the Tozo branding also works as a touch area, and it has LEDs to show you when it's syncing to a device. There's a meshing on the upper section of the earphones, which I can only imagine being some form of a venting port, which will help with how these sound to a certain extent. And the opening under the LEDs are likely the microphones these have for phone calls. These come with braces in case you want to make your fit a little more secure. I prefer these without the braces for longer listening times, but they will help if you go for runs with these earphones. They do sit comfortably around the ear, but placement is important when it comes to how these sound. These come with an IPX5 rating, so should be fine for workouts and if you get caught in a drizzle while outdoors, but it's best to wipe these down before placing them back in the case. The rubber stem tends to hold on to oils, which can cause issues with the contacts if not wiped down. These come with Bluetooth version 5.3, have touch controls, and you can also play around with the Tozo app to tweak the touch controls as well as the sound. Upon opening the app, you'll see the earbuds battery percentages. You can do a software update if there is one available, and you can go into the touch controls to customize them if you'd like to. By default, a single tap on either bud will let you play and pause your media. A double tap will take you to the previous song on the left bud and take you to the next song on the right bud. A triple tap will activate your voice assistant, and a long press on the left earbud will reduce your volume, and the same on the right will increase your volume. And for when you want to use these earphones for taking any calls, a single tap will answer phone calls, a long press for 2 seconds will reject an incoming call, and a long press will hang up a call when you're in one. You can customize the other settings by tapping on the options they have. Then you get a manual EQ and a whole bunch of presets you can choose from for changing up how these sound. I'll speak about this in the chapter about sound. Due to its open design, these obviously don't come with any active noise cancelling because the whole world will be bleeding in whenever you wear these, whether you're using them at home or whether you go for walks or runs, just so that you are aware of what's around you. But despite not having ANC, this does have microphones that will help with any environmental noise cancelling in case you want to take any phone calls to help isolate your voice over all the noise around you. So if you do want to see how this will sound in a busy environment, there really is only one way to show you how. So I'm calling you from the usual busy street I do all of my call tests from, just to give you a sense of how much of noise these earphones are going to be battling. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of two-wheelers, four-wheelers. You might get a few trucks blowing pressure horns as well. And behind me there is some construction work going on as well. So I have been on the camera microphone all this time, and I will switch over to the Tozo OpenEGO microphones right about now. So this is the overall vocal tonality you can expect to carry over to your recipient. Now, no doubt, this is the busiest, or should I say the worst kind of setting you can be in. If you're out on a run or on a walk, this is pretty much how it will sound being carried over to your recipient. Now, if you are at home or in an office, it will sound significantly better than this. Now, usually what I do when I'm on a call test, I usually toggle between the active noise cancelling modes just to see if there's a bit of a stress on the ENC algorithm whenever it's on. But since this doesn't have active noise cancelling, I will do one thing. If you do want to casually take a call and pick up one earbud, just to see how this manages, I'll remove one earbud and put it into the case. So yeah, but I'll put it back into the case and I'll close it. So this is how it will manage with one earphone. So right now it will only be using one microphone out of the two because each earbud does have one microphone. So this is your overall call demo. This is pretty much
how your vocal tonality will carry over to your recipient. And I do hope that this demo has given you a better understanding of these earphones, and I will see you back at the studio.
These come with 16.2 dynamic drivers, support the SPC and AAC codecs, and have a frequency response of 20 Hz all the way up to 20,000 Hz. And when it comes to a volume front, well, I've been very comfortable listening to these between 30 and maybe 40%. 50% volume does get a little too loud for me in enclosed spaces, but when outdoors and there's a lot of noise bleeding in, 50% is just fine. But this can get a bit too loud at 60% and further, and if you intend on preserving your hearing, I wouldn't advise listening to this beyond 60 and 70% for prolonged periods of time. Now at lower volumes, this is bound to thin out. Most audio equipment does, and this all the more because it is an open design. So the minute you start going below 30% volume, even in enclosed spaces, you start losing a lot of the lower frequencies, which is expected. Soundstage exists within a bubble in your head, but it does give you the illusion of some tones coming from a little further out of them, but this happens very rarely. It does have a well-centered phantom channel with good left and right separation as well, but most of your music exists within this bubble in your head along a horizontal plane. Imaging on these is surprisingly good. In fact, it details very well. In fact, if you want to focus in on certain vocals or even instruments in the higher or mid range, it's very easy to focus on into certain nuances. So I was quite surprised that it's able to do this. Now, no doubt it is not an audiophile level of detail recovery, but considering you're going to be using this when you're going out on walks and runs or while doing chores around the house, its detailing is more than good enough. High frequencies are certainly elevated, but it's most likely tuned this way so that it has enough energy by the time it reaches your eardrum. This range can be offensive to someone who has high frequency sensitivity, but thankfully you can tune this via the manual EQ or presets you have within the app, which I'll get to soon. Instruments in this range do come at you with a sense of enthusiasm, but there's a very specific range here that seems to have a peak in its tuning, which can be nearer the piercing side of things. Apart from that specific high, most of this range is clear and has a softer presentation. Listening to Dave Matthews Band perform The Space Between, the cymbal can come through as being a little too bright for me, but thankfully only slight adjustments on the manual EQ make this range much easier on my ear. This range having this enunciation isn't as noticeable when you've got movements and noises around you when you're outdoors. Perhaps Tozo decided to give this tweak so that you don't lose a sense of richness when you're on the go. Mid frequencies do have a recess compared to the highs, but it does have a slight elevation in the upper mid range. This kind of tuning always makes vocals sound on the thinner side of things, which does make these sound a little sibilant with some recordings. There are certainly a lot of challenges with open style earphones, and handling the mid range is one of them, but this kind of tuning will make these ideal for audiobooks or podcast consumption if you like listening to them while on the move. Again, a few tweaks in the manual EQ or choosing different presets can change this up a bit. Listening to Carol Woods and Timothy T. Mitchum perform a truly beautiful rendition of Let It Be. Timothy's voice does sound more nasal than I'd like, but Carol's voice does lose a lot of body here. The strength and detail that should exist with her voice and the backup vocals doesn't come through as much as I'd like it to. But having said that, for a set of open earphones, these carry a good amount of detail, which does give this range a certain amount of crispness in its overall delivery. When it comes to low frequencies, these do pretty well. So much so that if you are considering buying a set of bone conduction earphones, just don't. Go for these instead. This is an open design, so your mid and sub-low frequencies are bound to take a hit here. These have more of a kick in the upper bass region, so you do get a good amount of bass considering this is an open design. With some recordings in enclosed spaces, you can hear the mid and sub-low frequencies come through, but not when you're outdoors for sure. You will certainly get more of a bass kick from these than any sort of bone conduction earphones, so it will help you keep going for any workouts. Listening to Justin Timberlake and Chris Stapleton perform Say Something, there's a hefty amount of bass in this track, which is the only reason I realized these can actually push out mid and sub-low frequencies in quiet enclosed spaces, which is impressive. I did try listening to other tracks for this range, but your music really needs to have a heavy bass line to be able to hear the lower registers of your music. If you do want to play around with the sound with these earphones, Tozo does have a 10 band EQ with a plus minus 5 dB gain, so you can really fine tune and play around with the kind of sound you do want to listen to. But if you aren't the type who wants to play around with the manual EQ, Tozo does provide 16 different presets, which are standard, which is the setting straight out of the box that I've tested these with. It's a completely flat tuning according to the app, but does have its color in the highs like I did mention. Bass Plus boosts the upper, mid and sub-low frequencies, giving your audio a little more roundedness, which definitely sounds nicer than the standard tuning. Bass Minus reduces the bass and some mid-range, making these even more high-range prominent. Classical is tuned with elevated lows, recessed mids and boosted highs. It does sound a little more like how a wireless earphone would with this tuning, but the highs are a bit bright for me here. Dance makes vocals sound a little more nasal with the right amount of high highs reduced to not hurt the ear as much. Deep has a little more depth than dance thanks to reducing the highs as much as it does. Hip hop is a nice tuning which I can see myself using most of the time with these earphones, but only after reducing the highest band. It's a fun sounding tuning with the right amount of bass, mids and highs. Jazz is usually a preset I like since it's tuned for more acoustic instruments, and this one does exactly that. This tuning is great for anything from rock, jazz and blues to anything with natural instruments really. It gives a sense of giving clarity and depth to your music. Original is a little too boosted in the lower mids and rolls off with the upper bass. This preset will work well for audiobooks and podcasts for the mid-range. Piano works well for softer music where you don't have too much going on in your track. A single instrument to maybe 4 to 5 is fine with an acoustic track. You might miss the lower frequencies with this tuning. Pop is tuned in a 90s cassette tape fashion. It sounds like listening to music on an old tape deck with mid accentuation, recessed lows as well as highs. R&B gets a bit of a kick to it in the bass, and a heavily recessed mid-range makes it sound like your vocals are coming to you from quite a distance, and highs are elevated by quite a bit. Rock is easier on the ears with a slightly more forward mid-range. I prefer this tuning over the last. Vocal works better than the original preset for podcasts and audiobooks since its highs aren't as elevated. Treble Plus does as it says and boosts the treble range with recessed mids and bass so it can get a bit piercing, and Treble Minus has a flat mid-range and bass response while reducing the highs quite significantly. So to sum up, overall on a build front, I do like how this has been put together. It is a nice looking case. It is a bit on the larger side, but what I do like about it is that you can leave the case at home and take the earphones out with you. But one thing to keep in mind is that rubber section on the stem, if you wear it while you're working out and so on, there will be oil and sweat and even salt deposit on that rubber stem. So wiping it down before you put it back in the case, I think is very important. And the overall finish on the earbud is also pretty good. It does feel quite premium with the matte finish and the Tozo branding where it has the touch controls. And it is pretty comfortable, and it's despite its size, it's not heavy at all. On a feature front, it's got what you really need. Its connectivity is pretty good with Bluetooth version 5.3. I've not experienced any cutoffs or drop-offs. Now, if you do go far away from the transmitting device, it will start cutting, which is expected. But as long as your device is close to you, it should be more than good enough. Now, I did mention that you can leave your case at home, and something that happens with a lot of other earphones is when if you take those earphones out and leave the case at home and they go into standby mode, there's no way of putting those on. But this in particular can be switched on and switched off as well. So a long press and hold on it when it's off will switch it on, and the same thing will put it off as well. So it's nice that they've thought about that. So you don't really need to worry about the case when it comes to going out without it. On a sound front, these are very reliant on how close or far they are from your ears. So I did play around with pulling them a little lower, pushing them closer into my ear and so on. So distance from your ear will definitely make a big difference to how these sound. So if you do have slightly larger ears, or if your ears tend to sit, I think, a little further forward, it will sound different to many different people. It's bound to, because it is an open design. So the fact that it is an open design means it is very tricky. It's not going to sound the same to many people, and they have boosted a lot of things so that you do get that kind of audio experience. Now, the highs are definitely boosted in one specific area. It does peak somewhere, which can be piercing. So if you're high frequency sensitive, straight out of the box, it might be offensive. But like I did mention, you can sort of play around with the tuning within the EQ, the manual EQ in particular. And what's nice is even if you choose a different preset, you can also modify those presets. It's not that you're locked into that specific setting. So it's nice that they give you that option as well. Now, when it comes to its mid and low frequency as well, the mid range, because of that recess in the lower mids, does sound thin and anemic. It does sound a bit tinny. Some vocals do sound very nasal. It's not as full sounding, but then again, you're not buying these earphones to listen to audiophile levels of audio. You're buying these earphones because you want to be able to hear your music while you do your activities, be it in or out of the house, and you want to be aware of your surroundings. So it's nice that this company is even making something like this. So overall, I can honestly say that the fact that it's able to push out as much bass and lower sub frequencies that it can is quite impressive, especially for a dynamic driver that's sitting that far away from your ear. Tozo has been working on some sort of software tech, and they're coming up with new stuff. I have heard it on their other equipment, and it's nice to see that they're actually using a certain amount of sound tech across the board when it comes to all of their products. So overall, on a sound front, I'd say it's obviously not for the audiophile. It's there if you do want to listen to music and be on your run. So all in all, I would say it's not bad. It can get a little sibilant in the mid range, but again, the fact that you can correct it in the EQ is quite amazing. So it's a matter of preference really. Do you want an over-ear style open ear design? I think Tozo also makes another kind of open style earphone that I did review some months ago, where it loops over the ear, but the driver is more facing towards your eardrum. So it's very interesting to see the same company coming out with two different iterations of open style earphones. So it's nice that they've got the option, so you can always decide which one you want to go for. So anyway, all in all, I'd say it, considering how much it goes for, the fact that it sounds like it does, the fact that it details as well as it does, I think is pretty good. So anyway, coming to the price of these, well, at the time of recording this video, these do have a maximum retail price of about $69.99, but they do have a selling price of about $39.99. So I'll put the prices up here and the links below if you do want to buy these. And is this really value for money? Well, honestly, considering it going for the price that it is, I don't think that there are many open style earphones in this segment, or should I say the price range, because I have tested some bone conduction earphones, and honestly, those are fine for, those sound like glorified tweeters. A lot of them are just highs and upper mids, but this has a more roundedness to the vocal range, and you can play with the EQ settings, and it certainly has a lot more bass than any bone conduction earphones that I've ever heard. So is it value for money? Absolutely yes. I'd say for this cost, if you want something to listen to casual music for around the house or when you go for your runs, this makes a lot of sense. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative, and I do hope that it helped you make some sort of purchase decision. If you would like to help support the channel, I'm sure you know exactly how to. But of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.